Welcome to this episode of our extraordinary webinar series, where we explore the people, ideas, and stories shaping the future of our industry. Today, we're looking at a subject that connects business well-being and our shared responsibility to the planet, ESG. I'm joined by Gina Camfield, Head of ESG for Aramark UK and Global Offshore. With a background in sport and nutrition and a passion for health and sustainability, Gina brings a unique perspective to ESG, one that blends science, people, and purpose. At Aramark, she leads strategies that reduce environmental impact, champion well-being, and create social value while inspiring behavioural change at scale. Gina, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Before we dive into the questions, perhaps you could start by sharing a little of your own journey and what led you to this role.
Thanks so much for having me, Helen. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation. So my background is a bit of a mix, really. It's got a bit of football, a bit of nutrition, some hospitality thrown in there, and then now focusing on ESG. And on paper, all of those things might seem absolute worlds apart. You're probably thinking, how do you get from one to the other? But actually, what I've found is that on the way, a lot of them share the same principles. And the journey has really just been quite a nice segue from one to the next, all the way into the position that I'm in today. So I started out in football, played such a huge part of my life. So I played from the age of 5 for local teams, then moved into regional centres of excellence, and then made my way into Bristol Academy in their setup at the age of 16, playing under Mark Sampson, who later went on to become England women's manager. And that was a huge time in my life, moving away from home at the age of 16, leaving my parents 4 hours away to go and play football. I think my mum looks back on it now and thinks, how on earth did I do that?
Yeah.
Moving to an area, I had no friends there. I had no connections, no family there, but all I knew that I wanted to do from the age of 10 was to play football. And I'm so lucky that my family let me do that. And that I was in a position where I was able to go and pursue my dreams, go play in a football academy where we were playing 4 or 5 times a week, living, breathing, eating football. Alongside that, I studied sport and exercise science, went on to the University of Bath to do sport and exercise science, specialised in nutrition, and thought, you know what, I love football. My dream job is going to be working with footballers in the area of nutrition. I chose nutrition because it was an area back then we didn't really get much support on, if I'm totally honest. It was quite an unknown area of sports performance. We knew we needed to eat protein, we needed to eat carbs, protein for our recovery, carbs for our energy. But actually going further than that in terms of how we need to eat, the types of foods we needed to eat, we weren't really guided on. And I suffered a little bit from that. In sort of short term, I suffered with an eating disorder. And I thought, you know what, I really don't want others to go through what I've gone through with this. That's why I set out to go into the area of nutrition, to understand more about it from a personal perspective, but to hope that I can impact other people's lives as well in that sense. So I did, luckily enough, get the opportunity to work with a professional football club as their first team nutritionist. But at the same time as that was working with just general public in terms of helping them with their health and nutrition. And I found that really rewarding, that I could completely change someone's life through their nutrition, particularly helping with diabetic patients. So that sort of segued my career into focusing on nutrition. I was still playing football at the same time as having a full-time career. So I went on to play for Sheffield FC in Tier 3, just below the Women's Super League, and then finished my career at Chesterfield, which was my home club. So I retired there 2 years ago now. So it's been a big change in my life, stepping away from football. But as an athlete, you know when the time's right. You dedicate such a huge period of your life to one thing. And actually, I was at a point where I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, and it was ready for me to step away and then focus on the new chapter of life, which was my career. So started working in nutrition, and then the role within nutrition that I had actually just naturally evolved into more of an ESG role. And actually, it's not a huge pivot. It's quite a natural progression because you go from what's looking at good for you and what's good for people to looking at what's good for the planet. So similarly in sport as well, you're always working towards a bigger goal as part of a team. You want to win the league, you want to win the cup, those sorts of things. And in ESG, I feel like I'm doing very much the same thing, but just on a bigger scale. I'm working with lots of people within my team or my company that I'm currently in, but also the wider industry, just to look at how we can reduce our impact on the planet, but also increase our impact on people. So really, it's been quite a nice natural progression in my career, and one that I've loved every minute of.
Gosh, that's really fascinating, and also that sort of team aspect that you've taken from sport into what you're doing now. And as you say, it's sort of a natural progression, even though on paper it doesn't look like it at all. But what initially drew you from where you were into ESG? Was it the opportunity to sort of build on what you'd already achieved and then move into something new? What was the drive?
Yeah, I mean, primarily when I think about it, it's always been about how can it's that desire to do better. I want to work in an area where I can try and have a positive impact on people's lives, because that sense of fulfillment that you get is just amazing. But then when you talk to it and about working in a team, I think if you've been an athlete in a team, you've always got that sort of need and that desire to want to be part of a team now. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, ESG, you have to work in a team to achieve anything. And so I think perhaps subconsciously there was that sort of draw there to go to somewhere where I could really work amongst people. I think also nutrition really sort of connected me to that idea that making small changes in your life can completely change outcomes. So, for example, in football, simply getting a good night's sleep or having the right fuel before a match is absolutely essential. And the same can be applied for when we're working in ESG. So it might be that we're looking at reducing waste or sourcing differently, doing really small steps in that but across a huge scale like an organization can deliver huge results. And I guess there's a competitive element ties in there as well. When we're driving to make change, it does feel like that sort of that competitive need and that desire to achieve that, which I think is really important if you're working in a role like ESG.
Yeah, and you talk about I think often when we think of ESG, we don't necessarily think of the sort of health and well-being aspects of it. We talk about sort of people and planet, but sometimes we move towards the planet aspect first. But how would you say, and learning from your background, how does that sort of individual health and well-being fit into that conversation within a company, within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, for me, people and planet are just two sides of the same coin. They absolutely go hand in hand because we need to do both to be in a better place for ourselves and for the planet. And if we look at it, healthy people are much more likely to make healthy choices for the planet as well. But I mean, if only it was that easy. I think we know so much about the importance of this, but we're also at the same time so far from cracking it and delivering what we need to deliver as an organization or organizations globally, as well, from both a health and sustainability point of view. And I think going back, I always like to pull things back into sort of sporting references. Um, just it helps me to understand these things as well. But I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest comparisons that we can make in this between sport and ESG is that you don't win one season in one game. A coach once said that to me. It's much more of a bigger picture. And that's exactly what it is with sustainability, social responsibility, health, well-being as well. It's having sort of consistent strategic action over a long period of time, which is going to win us the game essentially.
Yeah. So it's really a case of sort of moving from companies integrating sort of well-being into their framework as an essential, not just sort of a nice to have, but sort of a core part of their strategy. Is that fair?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it has to be a core part of their business strategy,
Yeah.
regardless. A lot of businesses will have their ESG strategy, their business strategy, but really it needs to weave throughout that business strategy because It's all about responsible business. And you mentioned about the part that individuals playing it as well. The fact is that we're all responsible. I think organisations do have a responsibility to encourage their employees, their people, to do the right thing. But it's down to our individuals in the end. I think if we think, oh, I'll leave it to someone else, then the next person's going to think that, and then the next person. So for me, it's just really critical that we all take responsibility for our own actions, really. But then we have the likes of organisations, governments that can really support people in that journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think sometimes we get lost in the jargon a little bit, or maybe it's someone else's remit and not necessarily sort of a collective responsibility, which we can all contribute to, which actually makes it a little bit more achievable if we're all just part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that brings us to your role really at Aramark. So just to give us an idea, what does your role involve and what are your main areas of focus?
Yeah, so as head of ESG, I lead our work on environmental sustainability, social value, and governance across our UK and global offshore business. Aramark are a global company, and we are split into different regions. We all align to the same ESG principles, but we have leaders in each region who sort of take our goals and really drive them, and also tailor it as well, depending on the needs of that region. So a lot of the work that I do is working with our teams on initiatives that deliver against our strategy, but also make sure that we're meeting regulatory and client expectations as well. At Aramark, we've got a really diverse portfolio of clients across multiple sectors, including sports and entertainment, government services, education, healthcare, workplace, and offshore, all of which come with their own nuances. And whilst we want to make sure that we are driving towards our goals and targets, we also need to ensure that we're supporting our clients on their initiatives as well, that we're delivering on site. So at Aramark, Be Well, Do Well is the framework that we use around ESG. It's a really simple message. I love it, just about being well and doing well, both for people and the planet. And under that, there's a framework, and it has really clear, measurable goals that we're working towards, all around empowering our people in the areas of things like safety and community, through to our route to net zero as well. So yeah, that's a bit about what I do every day.
That's great. And can you share any examples specifically of how Aramark is aligning its operations with ESG priorities in your remit, but sort of globally as well, as you say, that they align as a global company?
Yeah, of course. Essentially, we realize we have to align our business priorities with our ESG priorities. Like I said earlier, it's not something that sits alongside a strategy. It has to form that key part of it. And we're beyond the point of tagging ESG into the conversation at the end. Sort of, it's no longer we have the business meeting here. Oh, and what are we doing about ESG?
Yeah.
It's how do we filter that message through it to make sure that the decision that we're making is, yes, it's financially the right decision for the business, but do you know what? It's good for our business long term in terms of ESG, because that's really what ESG is. It's just about being responsible with your business and really future-proofing our business to make sure we're going to be here in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And in terms of operationally, in order to drive change, we need it to be a key part of our operations, because that's where the biggest scope is. What we recognise is that our on-site teams can play a really big part in the way that we're running our business on site, be that from building recipes, building menus. So, for example, as an organisation, our biggest area to improve in terms of our emissions is in our scope 3 purchase goods and services, which is primarily the food we're buying and serving. We need to reduce how much red meat we're using, how much dairy we're using as a business, essentially, if we're ever going to meet our net zero targets that we have in place for 2050. So we need to ensure that we're making those changes, empowering our teams to deliver more sustainable menus on site, whilst achieving all of the other drivers that we need to meet when customers come to choosing their food options in our spaces. So it always needs to be convenient, it needs to have choice, it needs to hit the price point, it needs to be good quality. And you know what? Underpinning all of that, you've got a good sustainable option there. So that's the sort of journey we're on and how we're trying to embed it in our operations. There's lots of other things that we're focusing on. It's not just about the food we're serving, it's about the water we're saving, the energy we're conserving, the waste we're reducing. It's a really big picture. But going back to my earlier point, those little things that we can do along the way do all add up when you're in an organisation of our size who's serving over 250,000 meals a day in the UK alone. So the impact we can have is absolutely huge. And I think sort of on that as well, it's really important we don't get caught up on that E side of ESG. The environment, the S and the G are just as important. So for us at Aramark on the social side, we have a program called Aramark Building Community, and it's all about giving employees the time to get involved on projects. So it could be things like cooking classes, volunteering, mentoring young people, to try and encourage them into hospitality careers as well, which is all about how we can give back as a business and go sort of beyond the food that we're serving. And like I say, that social impact side of things is really important to us. And to me, that's sort of looking at how we build a strong squad as well. Again, bringing it back to sport, it's how we bring really good talent into our industry, retain them, and show them how fantastic the hospitality industry can be.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really good point there about bringing people along with you, because you can have all the policies you like and all, drive it from the top, but ultimately you have to bring your people along and get them to buy into it and see the value, but also the clients as well. How do you find that aspect of it, bringing people with you on the journey?
Yeah, it's like you say, it is essential. It can't be down to one person, one team within an organization to drive change because it just won't happen. You need to have everyone on board with it. And it's not easy. It's not easy to get people interested in something if they haven't already been interested in it. And for me, you have to really try and make it relevant to them, and then they'll start to understand it. So make it relevant to their lives, to their role, to the client that they're working with, to their environment, so that they can see and start to understand the why we need to do it. And I think we're all motivated differently. Some people are motivated intrinsically to do something, so maybe perhaps because it feels good. Some people are motivated extrinsically to do something, so it might be the financial reward, for example. So it dives deeper into actually understanding what drives people to making change and getting them on board, and then utilizing that to really sort of bring them on the journey. And then I think maintaining momentum all comes down to regular communication and support with the teams as well. So once you've got them engaged on something that they're interested in, really just keep communicating with them to maintain that level of engagement and the understanding the importance, and give them the support. So regular updates, giving them feedback. And I think one of the things that I find works really well in our business is celebrating the success as well.
Yeah.
Even something small, if we give that praise, the reward, shout about it internally, externally, that's really important because it's not easy. It's not easy to get these success stories when it comes to sustainability all the time. So we really need to recognize that. Especially in our industry, a lot of the time it can be people going above and beyond what they're doing in their day-to-day jobs, to do something special in this space. And yeah, it really needs to be recognized. So definitely important to take time to reflect when people do a good job, and let them know about it as well. But I think the client side of things is really interesting. So that's sort of how we're engaging people internally with our ESG platform, Be Well, Do Well. We have training programs as well in there. We have incentives that run around it. We have sustainability weaved in throughout our business. So like I say, it's standalone. It weaves throughout HR, learning and development, marketing, etc. But then when it comes to the client side, that's really interesting because we've seen such a shift in client perceptions of ESG, sustainability, CSR, whatever you want to refer to it as. Again, it's no longer that thing that's added on the end of a sort of conversation or a QBR or a tender. It's right in the meaty bit in the middle. Because people are starting to understand the importance of having this not just on the agenda, but delivering measurables around it and the positive impact that it can have on their business as well. In so many different ways, we can look at improving margins. We have to deliver against sustainability and regulations around sustainability to avoid any penalties that might come and also protect our brand as well. So I think it's come such a long way, and I'd say within a really short space of time, but certainly a very welcomed one and one that we really need to embrace now.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether you think it feels like the case is easier to make almost, and whether the journey is getting easier for you. But it sounds like that very much is the case, and that's probably a variety of factors that go into that. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's one of those that can be a double-edged sword. It can be really useful in that our awareness and that the communications are increasing, but at the same time, as people become more exposed to information in this space, we also need to be wary of misinformation as well. I think for me, I've seen a really similar journey with sustainability as we saw with nutrition. Nutrition started and we had very much our fundamentals of good nutrition, which still stands now. And the more we've learned and the more interest that there's become in this area, we also see a lot more information or misinformation on platforms like social media, which can really heavily influence people's sort of understanding or ideas in this space. And we have to be careful with that, because at the end of the day, we all need to stay on track with our shared goal. And I see sustainability coming like that as well. I think it's great that people have their opinions, because that's the only way that we can learn and really dig deeper into these subjects. But at the same time, we need to not get lost along that journey. And you mentioned jargon earlier. Sustainability is a space that's full of those. And I think if we're not careful, we'll lose track of sort of the fundamentals that we need to do well and get lost amongst some other things that are coming into the picture.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because you've got to strip it down sometimes, bring it back to the basics to take away some of that complication. And it's about sort of behavioural change, but again, bringing people along with you. So just to sort of, I suppose, simplify it, what behavioural shifts amongst employees, clients, consumers would you say are the most crucial to achieving the ESG goals?
It's a really good question. I think I'd say understanding that why is really important, and then making it meaningful is the key to any behavior change, understanding the why. For example, if we were working with athletes, we wouldn't just tell them you need to train harder if you want to get better. We'd show them how the training is going to make them faster, make them fitter, make them stronger. And I think that's really similar in ESG. We need to not just say to people, you need to do this, you need to recycle, actually educate them on the why they need to do that. And then they're much more likely to make that decision, and sometimes even ask them that question. There's been some really interesting research around sort of recycling bins and putting just sort of recycle this, compared to if we ask, will you recycle today?
Yeah.
If you're asking people that question of will they do something, I think they're much more likely to want to do it than if we're telling them to do something. And I think there's lots that we can relate that to as well. If we say to people, you need to cut waste in a kitchen, like you need to speak to them in terms of why it's important.
Yeah.
So it's important from an environmental perspective, but from your margin perspective as well. So then we start speaking to those intrinsic and extrinsic motivators of it's the right thing to do, but you know what? There's a financial benefit to doing it as
Making
well
the
to the
business case
business.
for it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when we understand that why it's important, and also the impact if you don't change the behavior, what's going to be the consequence where your margins won't be as good. We're going to have sort of more weight that we need to put through a waste distribution, that sort of thing. I think that can be really impactful. And then once we understand the why, demonstrating how to do it is then sort of the next step as well.
It's giving ownership to people, isn't it? And a reason to do it.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, a lot of the practices that we do to be more sustainable are common sense stuff that we know that we should be doing, but we can just do it a little bit better. And like you say, giving people that ownership rather than saying you must do this is definitely a better way to go about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I think you've touched upon some of these already, but as we know, ESG can be complex in a corporate setting. But what do you think are the biggest challenges you've encountered?
Yeah, it can be a big challenge. And you know what? It can be quite daunting when you step back in a role of ESG and think about actually what you need to achieve. And I think that's probably one of the biggest risks, actually. At the same time as being one of the biggest challenges, it's really easy to get caught up in the size of the task at hand if you look at it on paper. And I think it's easy to get quite overwhelmed and possibly risk achieving very little by thinking, oh my goodness, the task at hand is huge. So that's why I think it's important to step back from that and balance your ambition with actually what's practically sort of achievable, really.
Yeah,
And I think that's a real challenge. Often we have a lot of enthusiastic people working in sustainability, and it's great, and you have to be in order to keep sort of banging the drum and make change in this space. But it's really easy to sort of set your ambitions too high, I think, and set two goals that are too bold. And I think we just have to recognize that, not be too harsh on ourselves, and understand that if the infrastructure in areas that are out of our control isn't ready, then all we can do is build on what we've got and work towards it, because it will come. So I'd say, yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, is the sort of the breadth of ESG, how much falls under it, and how we stay on track with what we want to achieve. And for me, having sort of a solid framework to work to at Aramark with Be Well, Do Well really makes that so much easier, because we have clear goals that we know that we need to achieve, and they're ambitious in that we need to work hard to achieve them, but they're absolutely achievable. And that's the key thing to me. And then alongside that, how you integrate it into your organization, you need to have that support network. So like I said earlier, it can't be down to one person, one team, but looking at how we integrate it into HR, into learning and development, into procurement, culinary, all of those spaces within the business, where they can help you work towards those shared goals. And I think that's where we've seen one of the big successes in driving ESG at Aramark. Not only because it helps sort of spread the message throughout the organization. And then, do you know what? Half the time, someone will be doing something and they're not even thinking, I'm doing this because it's the sustainable thing to do. I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do
makes
for
sense.
the business, but also it's sustainable as well. But talking to that, we've also found that it's really important to have the right people talking to the right people.
Right.
And our culinary teams are the perfect example of that. We introduced someone into the business. His role is culinary director for planet and wellbeing, but his background is as a chef. He was already within the business, but we created this role as part of our new food platform, and it's his job to drive sustainability and wellbeing into our menus and into our recipes. Now, getting chefs, talking to chefs is the right thing to do. I'm not in the right place to go into a kitchen with no culinary experience and start telling chefs you need to take beef, you need to reduce beef on the menu, you need to look at the dairy that we're using, etc. It's not going to go down well, I can tell you that. But putting a chef in that position who can talk to them about the intricacies, who spent time in a kitchen, and ultimately who they really respected prior to him stepping into this role, has been such a fantastic achievement for us in the business, and is really changing the way that we're having those conversations in the kitchen.
Yeah, that makes so much sense when you actually say it out loud, though, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
and it can translate across all functions. If we
Yeah,
get HR people talking to HR about sustainability, if we get marketing people talking to marketing people, legal talking to legal,
yeah,
it all helps to make sense. Yeah.
and to that end, are there any sector specific factors that make ESG implementation easier or harder, would you say?
I'd say what makes it easier in our industry is the collaboration between different businesses. So we've got some amazing networks within the hospitality space, EP being one of them, UK Hospitality, the Hospitality Sector Council, who bring leaders together who are in these positions. And that is just so helpful. I mean, I also like to relate to them sometimes as counselling sessions because we get it all off our chest and we talk about what's
Mhm.
really on our mind. But no, it's all about that collaboration, sharing of ideas. Because this topic is so broad, it's also quite new. We're learning our way with it. There's always new legislations, regulations coming in around it. It can be really hard to keep up with. But having these shared spaces where we can come together, share what we're experiencing, our learnings is really useful because essentially, yes, sometimes we are competitors against each other in the same room, but essentially and ultimately we have that shared goal of we need to do the right thing for the planet and the right thing for people as well.
Yeah. And looking to the future, are there any particular trends in ESG that particularly excite you? As you say, it's changing all the time.
Yeah, and I do wish I had a crystal ball sometimes because that would
Wouldn't we
definitely
all?
definitely make things much easier seeing what's going to be coming down the line. But I think in terms of what I'm really excited about is this momentum in the shift of the conversation, how ESG is featuring in those big conversations now. It's featuring in board level conversations, but then it's also filtering all the way down throughout the organization. And that's where it needs to be. I'm still not saying that every organization is 100% there. We've still got a long way to go. But just seeing that momentum and that traction that's already gaining is really exciting because it's a bit like a snowball. Once we get it rolling, if we keep that snowball rolling, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's exactly what's going to happen with ESG. And that's the next step that we need to take in order to deliver the change that we need to see. I think I'm also excited to see the new tech and innovation that's coming through in the space. That's going to give us much better access to data and tools that are going to allow us to make a difference. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what's coming down the line or that's what's come into the sort of tech world of sustainability, but also what's to come later down the line because it's only going to get better and better and empower ESG leaders to be able to do their jobs even better.
Yeah. Have there been any particular um, sort of tech changes that just in the last couple of years that you've seen that have really transformed things in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're much more familiar with the use of AI now, and we're building our trust in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really improving the way that we're able to drive efficiencies. And that is a key factor for us, particularly in hospitality, contract catering. I think we're at risk of asking our operators to do so much more than they used to do. And the more that we can use AI and tech to sort of improve those operating efficiencies and allow them to do what really differentiates the hospitality sector from tech and AI stuff, which really essentially comes down to the people play piece. If we can use tech and AI to take stuff away from them and focus on what they do best, then I think that's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's sort of harnessing tech and AI just for those advantages, really, and not being afraid, embracing it.
Absolutely. We've also had a big gap, and we still do have a big gap in terms of data when it comes to sustainability. That's certainly a big challenge that we face in this space, or should I say the lack of actually. And AI is definitely helping with that. And I think it will continue the more the sort of technology develops, the more it will improve that. And when we have the best quality data available, that's when we're able to make the best decisions that we know is going to drive a change.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of sort of leadership as well, what kind of leadership would you say is needed today to deliver the real impact for the people and planet? Has it changed, would you say?
I think it needs a leadership style that challenges the status quo of how we do things or have done things traditionally. Because that's essentially what a lot of it's about, is about change. And also people that have the ability to turn ambition into practical action, which isn't always easy in this space. And I think it's so important to have that operational understanding of a business as well as the ESG knowledge and background, because you have to have two in order to make anything happen. I also think it needs a leadership style that's relatable,
Hmm.
because essentially in an ESG role, you're trying to bring lots of people on that journey with you. So being relatable to those people to get them on board, so that you can make sort of collective action, I'd say is really key as well. I think the only other one that I would add into that is being agile. Things don't often always go as planned, and I think that's definitely one that I can relate back to my sporting days as well. You can train and prepare, map out your perfect match day, for example, in terms of your pre-match routine as much as you like, but actually on the day, it doesn't always go to plan and things can change. And that's exactly the same with sustainability. We can plan and plan, we can do what we think is the right thing to do, but then our understanding might change slightly, or actually how we deliver that or how we can practically deliver that might change. And that's when you have to be really agile in order to adapt to that.
Yeah, I think, and this podcast, we want to bring sort of emerging leaders into the conversation, really, and hearing from leaders like yourself as to their journey and how they've got to where they've got to. But it's about the sort of skills that you need to develop as well, and that's really helpful. It's giving people, um, a reason not to be afraid of making mistakes or pivoting if something isn't quite going to plan, and that agility, as you say, how crucial are all those skills to your role?
Yeah, 100%. And again, I think that sport gave me a lot of that coming into the corporate space. You have to be agile. You also have to be extremely resilient. And whilst at the time when you're going through things like injuries or perhaps you didn't make the squad, you're not thinking, oh, this is great. It's making me resilient as a person. Or you're only seeing the negatives. And I think it's only when you come out of that environment that you can really reflect and take that time to think, actually, what did I learn in that space? Or what can I take away from my time? And it might not be a sporting sort of career, it might be any career that someone's been in, but actually, what did I learn in that space from both the positive experiences and those negative experiences as well? But I would say agility and resilience are two really key ones that I'm fortunate of my sporting career for, that I've been able to put into practice today.
Yeah, no, that's such good advice. And then looking to that sort of emerging generation again, what advice would you give to anybody wanting to make a difference in ESG, health, or sustainability, especially starting out those careers? We know that there's a real appetite and an interest in younger generations in this, but what advice would you give them from a career point of view?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'd say probably don't wait until you're in a formal role as such as ESG, health and well-being, to start to think about how you could make a difference. I think just be curious, ask questions, keep learning. And then one thing I think really has really benefited me is connecting with people doing work that you think that you would like to do, or that you admire, because there's just so much that we can learn from our sort of peers in the industry. And the experience of people, to me anyway, speaks so much more in terms of volumes than what we can learn from a book. And like I say, the space of ESG sustainability is quite different to other sort of areas of a business that you might come across. It's very much a collaborative, friendly area to be working in. So yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to reach out, try and grow your network, and then learn from everyone who's around you.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And in terms of looking ahead again to the future, would you say you're quite optimistic about where things are heading and how things are looking in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going broader than that, I think it's looking really positive in the space of ESG. But I think for the industry of as well of hospitality, it's full of amazing people. And for me, we just really need to relish that and help people outside of the industry see how fantastic it is as a place to work. And it goes so much further than the roles that we traditionally think of when it comes to hospitality. And I think, yeah, it's really exciting to see where we head next to get the next sort of line of talent through into this space.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think that's a crucial aspect of this is to really make that case for the industry and how exciting it is. I mean, what would be your sort of last pitch to talent coming through from as you say, from different walks of life? You've got a real background that you wouldn't necessarily consider um, to be a normal trajectory. So what would be your sort of last pitch in terms of encouraging people into the sector?
I'd say to embrace every opportunity that you get, because that's exactly what I've done throughout my career. It's not always been smooth sailing, but if there's an opportunity that I've thought, "Do you know what, that sounds great, I'm going to go for it, just go for it," because it'll open new doors, and never close those doors that you leave behind as well, because the network of people that you'll create within this industry is so vast. And like I said earlier, I think it's really the people in hospitality that separates it from other industries. So yeah, I'd say to embrace that, embrace all of the people that you come across, but then also take those opportunities that are given to you, even if it might seem a bit intimidating, a bit outside of your comfort zone. Getting outside of your comfort zone is the only way to ever get comfortable, I think. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Gina, thanks so much for sharing your journey and insights with us today. It's been so interesting to hear about, your journey from sport, what you've learned and taken from sport into leadership now. And it's really clear that ESG it's not just about, meeting targets. It's really about people, purpose and the choices that, we can all make every day individually and collectively. So thanks so much. We look forward to seeing you next time for the next extraordinary conversation.
thank you so much for having me.